previous speaker make my life easy. Why we should be discussing fraud management? Is it because what has happened in the ecosystem in the past? I am reminded of one story which I heard when I was a young officer in the bank. I was told that the organization's feedback loop is like its nervous system. And I was given the example of an animal called Gigantosaur, which is the predecessor of dinosaur. Dinosaur also become extinct, and much before that, Gigantosaur also become extinct. Why? Because the nervous system is so weak that by the time the brain understands that there is a predator eating its tail, half of the body is eaten. And today, trust me, if what we saw is coming to be true, our nervous system will be pledged to IT. Our nervous systems, because of lack of use, or because we have forgotten how to use things, will be determined by what IT can deliver or what IT cannot deliver. Frauds are happening everywhere. Don't think that it is only happening in the banks. Everywhere, seen, unseen, it is happening. And what is the first call? System didn't behave well. Otherwise, it could have been prevented. Whether you are in automotive industry, whether you are in the banking industry, whether you are in the service industry, the first person who will be called when a fraud happens is probably the CIO. So better get ready to understand what is a fraud and how we can use the nervous system. And probably, somebody told it is artificial intelligence. I call it assisted intelligence. Because the moment you make artificial intelligence a substitute for real intelligence, you are in for trouble. When we joined the bank 3 decades back, we understood everything. Which one comes from where, it goes where, if it gets wrong, where it could be wrong. It was visible to us like mirrors. But today, thank it on IT or blame it on IT, we do not know what is going on. The youngsters of today have no idea, no clue. So how do we manage frauds? First, let us understand what is a fraud. It could be any of these, as they say, get to the basics. Of course, it's a crime. Common parlance, we know that it could be a crime for financial benefits by tricking or lying. It could also be, illegally, or dishonestly doing something. Or it could be simple misinformation. And we keep on telling it, "Arey, uska baat mat suno, wo to fraud hai." Today, selling is bordering on fraud. Organizations, enterprises have to keep on defending itself from all kinds of fraud. But the beauty of it is this. Most of the time, when we were young bankers, we were told that the most efficient person in the organization could be the fraudster. The most well-behaved person could be a fraudster. So how do we use technology for putting together all these things? The behavioral aspect of it, the transactional aspects of it, the intelligent aspects of it, the deviation aspects of it, the exception aspects of it. We will have to put it together in order that, because as you know, manners, the musics that is created to deceive people, the rules have not changed in the past few years. They come in the same old way and with the same old intent. Deceiving, making a quick money, tricking people to believe something, tricking organizations into doing something, trusting that organizations will not remember, and coming all the time with a lot of soothing things, manners, musics, acts. So keep this in your mind. Because today, if we trust, they say defining the problem is half the solution. I believe the other quarter is understanding the behavior and the ecosystem and dipping into the knowledge that all of us have as to how things happen. That is another quarter. Yesterday I was traveling with somebody in the airplane. They used to say that initial days of coding, 75% used to be design and only 10-15% coding. Today in the cloud era, you take code and start writing codes and believe that by the evening you should be ready. There's no time for design. When I used to live in London, from Piccadilly to Thames, there used to be a road. They planned for 3 years and execute for 3 months. That essentially is when we come to basic brass tack problems like fraud management. Remember, defining the problem should be taken the longest time. Understanding the behavioral dynamics is the other. Then probably you'll bring some IT. Otherwise, what we saw in the previous thing, mom is coming, dad is coming, grandmom is coming, granddad is coming. Machines should be trustworthy to open. Fraud probably cannot be managed that way. So the other thing that is happening is that when we look at fraud, the fraud has moved beyond transactions. It's not that somebody sold you a lemon and somebody taken you money. The people say that, the so-called GAFA companies are the colonizers of data. And colonizers are the first level of frauds because they take property without paying proper price for it. But it has moved from those transactions to the entire life cycle. Whatever we see, some or the other act of fraud is being perpetrated on us. And many times the velocity of the transaction is so much, the variety is so much that we are unable to understand what exactly is going on. And before we understand a fraud is already perpetrated and the fraudster is finding another place to strike. How do we deal with it? That is the challenge. Finance, non-finance. Manufacturing, service, doesn't matter. Small, big, doesn't matter. In our banking industry, initially, somebody told that computers used to generate up to 5th place of trade values. Somebody was taking 4th decimal onwards when it was crediting to his account. And in 1 year, he amassed some $20 million. Small things will add up in no time. And you will be blamed. Probably the system didn't behave well. So, examples galore. Frauds could happen anyway. A WhatsApp leak could lead to a fraud. A simple thing where somebody forgot to follow a small process could lead to a fraud. So I'll not deal a lot in this slide, except telling that what we are seeing is probably only the tip of the iceberg. What we are seeing is only probably, 2 to 3% of the 15%. So we better be careful. Now, have we come to a situation where, again, yesterday I was talking to Amazon in their office in Bangalore. Are we surviving because our security systems are working, or are we surviving because we are lucky? All of you must be asking this question all the time. Whether at the end of investing a whole lot of your company's money, you are no different. In that case, probably no fraud is equal to security. So if we look at that, all these things at the end of it will end up in fraud prevention. And how do we prevent somebody eating away dishonestly into enterprise assets? Now let us look at what is the traditional way of enterprise fraud management. In one way or the other, these frameworks, I am a great disbeliever of all these frameworks. In one way or the other, if you take a plain pen and pencil and a white piece of paper and write down what you are doing, probably you are doing, most of it. I spoke a few moments back about, behavioral analytics, endpoint profiling, who is using what. My request to all of you as CIOs is to think of what kind of technology you have. At the base level, of course, all of you must be having rule-based risk assessment. Somebody is doing something, whether it fits to the SOP, if it doesn't fit, probably there are frauds. Reports come to you, if it doesn't fit to a pattern, then probably there are frauds. So, at the low level of sophistication and at low level of sight, which is essentially post-facto analytics, is the rudimentary or basic level of fraud management. Everybody has to do it. Many times we do it without knowing it. But the whole journey is going towards that, which is, behavior analytics, user interface protection, and continuous risk assessment. These are the areas which will probably require some of the new technologies that we are talking about, whether it is artificial intelligence, whether it is robotics, process automation, whether it is machine learning, whether it is deep learning, whether it is velocity checking, pattern checking, whatever it is. So, profiling, again, we are doing. Whether you are doing Excel sheet-based profiling or whether you are doing absolute, visual profiling, doesn't matter. So, what you will have to look at is that when you look at taking new technologies to manage frauds in your organization, whether it is, managing fraud in the user systems, managing fraud in data, or managing frauds whatsoever, I always tell, remember what is the fit for purpose. It depends on what is your fit for purpose. Again, you are the only guy, chalk and talk within your organization, you will be able to discover it. Now, what we do in SBI is that we have a, complete system of identification, protection, detection, respond, and recovery. This is a famous framework. Nothing, again, if you look at this framework, it is available. And what we do, fraud detection, is that every time that a data comes, we try to identify whether it is genuine. Is a negative listing. And all of you are required some way or the other in IT. And there are known tools which are available. Anything that is breaching or exception or log monitoring, whatever, if you have Security Operations Center also, that will also be able to tell you what exactly is going on. But what we are not doing is that understanding that we generally stop at detection and to some extent we go to respond. But many of us live, fraud management to its own device. Yeah, time will heal. Yeah, some response is there. If we allow, press will forget about it. So the new technology, in my view, is not as much in identification, as much in detection. I think the new technology is required for governance, protection, and recovery. Because every organization has this so-called 4 legs on which the organization stands: people, process, technology, and governance. And trust me, I never get tired of telling this, that great organizations has this magic sauce. Ordinary concepts, extraordinary governance. And bad organizations and failed organizations have also some kind of a failed sauce. Extraordinary technology, extraordinary concept, poor governance. And in basic hygienic kind of thing like fraud management, what we require is application of new technology in the governance, protection, recover and respond. And what we need to do is that you cannot protect everything. I always say that those who try to protect everything end up protecting nothing. What are your crown jewels? What are the things that impact the organization or the enterprise most? How can we deploy new technology in those? Don't think that blockchain can be deployed everywhere for reconciling everything so that online notification happens to every stakeholder. Doesn't work that way. In the age of data, there are many things which we need to protect the enterprise assets or enterprise data from fraud. What ultimately is required is that in your organizations, the trick is not just, adopting new technology. The trick will be how you are taking your legacy tools and marrying them with new tools. Very difficult if somebody comes and tells me your old fraud detection systems are very bad in SBI and throw out and take my new tool. Doesn't work that way. Nobody will be allowed to throw out something simply because, the old tools have become bad. So finding that the so-called hybrid or bimodal or whatever way consultants call, doesn't matter. Essentially, you will have to find, because otherwise change management will become a big problem. Fraud detection, as I told you, and fraud identification, you can manage. But fraud recovery and fraud governance, these are the places where probably you will have to continuously find the sources, marry them with where exactly things could happen, and bring in new technologies. And which are these new technologies? Essentially what we are doing in SBI is doing a sense of automation, because you can imagine, morning I think Munish was telling at the scale at which we operate, the average transaction during day is about 5,000 transactions every second. And during peak hours like IRCTC Tatkal opens, the concurrency is about 30,000 transactions per second. So how do you do it? If somebody is making a fraud, and frauds can happen many ways. In IRCTC, somebody takes a file and finds a way of pushing the entire thing into the system. And even before the system detects, 60,000 dissatisfied customers are there because their Tatkal booking didn't go through. Somebody has put a spam and it blocks the entire thing. So when customer dissatisfaction can, if my system is down for, just calculate, do the math, it is very simple. If it is not responding for 10 seconds, there are 300,000 dissatisfied customers. And that is also a fraud. Bringing systems down, as they say, the Third World War, if it will be fought in the digital space. By bringing down an SBI, by bringing down an NIC, you can bring down India. Data fraud is the first place probably where all of you have to start, because many of the data fraud is happening because fraudsters very well understand that your employees are lazy. They will allow data to be compromised, and once data is compromised, there is a leverage on data and a fraud can be perpetrated. We do 3 lines of defense, but essentially what new technologies we are doing is robotic process automation, and little bit of artificial intelligence. And we do segmentation. We use a lot of digital platforms for something which we call PRM, Proactive Risk Manager. All of you can do it. I just wanted to tell you that in today's world, where I started, today's world, I don't think that artificial intelligence or the new generation analytics, without constant application of human intelligence, will be able to prevent or manage frauds. So again, when, as they say, usko ek thapad diya, uska nani yaad aa gaya. When we are in trouble, we go back to our roots. We go back to our basics. We start from first principles. So, artificial intelligence has to become assisted intelligence for fraud management. Your own intelligence has to come back for doing the design thinking for the fraud management system. Understanding your organization and organizational behaviors is very, very important. Checking the system, the cycle time, version check used to be once in 2 years. Probably you'll have to do it once in 3 days or once in 3 weeks. Thank you very much. Any questions? I think I did it.